Streaming at 1080 resolution. Can you see it? Can you feel it? Can you feel the power? Is my computer going to crash? Is my computer going to keep up? I don't know. Time will tell. 1,000 Pine Points to Martin Van de Kuij. 1,000 Pine Points to you. DB Cisco, sorry, you were not first, you were second, but you get 500 Pine Points. And Mannerite the Mennonite. Yeah, you have to keep trying, but you do get 250 Pine Points. And Humble Thinker, I don't know how you can walk around in public. This is twice, I think. Myron, is this twice? Humble Thinker has been here fourth? Yeah, our records show twice now. You've come in fourth, and that's incredibly humiliating for you. I mean, you're just being destroyed. I'm I'm getting the language of these young Muslim men who talk about me. Destroyed and humiliated is in my vocabulary now. How's the audio? Is it too hot? Am I too hot? Should I put on more clothes? I don't know. But this is exciting news. This just happened yesterday. This is hot off the presses. You missed the old background? I do too. Maybe I'll change it. Just for you, I'll change the background. John V. But yesterday, a lot of you probably are not aware, there is big news in archaeology. And they dug something up. And wouldn't you know it, there's records, even like the evidence for Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon back, I don't know how many, this is like 50 years before Jesus was born, apparently. And they dug up some records, and wouldn't you know it, Julius Caesar himself flew unaided across the Rubicon. And I mean, the records they found was from a soldier, a Roman soldier. And the Roman soldier said that he flew in front of at least 500. I think, is there 500 in a legion? No, it's 100, right? I guess there was 5 legions, or maybe there was people who were not Romans who witnessed it. I don't know, but Julius Caesar flew unaided over the Rubicon. Now, the Rubicon's not a huge river by any means, but still, he, according to the records that they just dug up yesterday, he levitated above sea level. It was in the air, and he just went across, and that inspired his soldiers so much. It changed their lives. So it says in this record that they dug up that Julius Caesar flew in front of around 500, and to 12 of his generals, and finally to the author of this letter. It's amazing stuff. And it changed the lives of the people who saw it, according to these records. And these records even go on to say that, what's the guy's name who was Julius Caesar's partner? The fat, bald guy. Is that Pompey? I say he's fat and bald because that's the way he's portrayed in the movie. Is it Pompey? Is that how you say it? Pompey actually killed a lot of the people who saw this. They died as martyrs for their belief that their hero, Julius Caesar, flew. And they never recanted. Never. I don't know how you explain that other than that, to say that Julius Caesar actually flew across the Rubicon. And apparently they haven't dug it up yet, but they can tell that there's like a box, and they're being very gentle because they don't want to destroy it. Apparently next to where they found these records of Julius Caesar flying, there's a box, and they've done thermal imaging and cameras. They stuck cameras in there, and it looks like there's 4 diaries in there. And some people think that there's even more eyewitness accounts for Julius Caesar flying over the Rubicon, because the first account is basically just from one guy, I forget his name, Pauline. And okay, now Christians, come on now. Come on. Be honest with me. You don't believe this for 1 second, do you? Now, well, I know I'm portraying a fib here, but really immerse yourself into this story for a second. Pretend for a second. Can you pretend? Sure you can. You did it as a kid. I'm sure you can do it now. Pretend for a second that everything I just said was real, that it was dug up yesterday. It does say that Julius Caesar actually flew across the Rubicon and that 500 people saw it, 12 of his best generals saw it, and finally the author of the record saw it. But it actually doesn't say saw it. It says appeared. And, this is one of the first things that that historians have discussed since yesterday is what does this word appeared mean? Did they actually see something, like see Julius Caesar go up in the air and fly across the Rubicon, or does it mean something else? There's controversy on this, but Christians, really immerse yourself into this thought experiment and ask yourself a very simple question. Do you believe it? Would you believe it if this happened yesterday? You wouldn't, would you? Not for 1 second would you believe it, would you? This is the problem, and this is why it's almost becoming ridiculous to talk about the historical narrative for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's becoming ridiculous. I mean, it has been ridiculous for a long time, but at some point, Christians, you have to admit that in any other circumstance, you would not believe such a huge claim, but you believe it for Jesus because you view the Bible as special, because probably you've experienced something in your life that tells you, well, there is a God, the supernatural is real, and therefore I believe this record. And you happen to be born in a country that espouses Christianity. It's not a genetic fallacy. I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong because of that, but I'm saying here's a reason to think you might have biases toward it. And you can see this very quickly when I say with a straight face that Julius Caesar flew over the Rubicon. You're going, I know. You're going to yourself, this is stupid. Doug is just like changing the flying man and applying it to Julius Caesar, but this is just stupid. This never happened. That same attitude you have about Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon is the attitude I would say most non-Christians have to your beliefs. That's how easily they dismiss it. Mike Licona was on. Oh, I gotta thank someone. Who was? Someone told me about this on Discord, or I read it on Discord. You know who you are. Thank you for this. This is this is a podcast, the Cerebral Faith Podcast, hosted by Evan Minton. I'm just going to play, I don't know, maybe half an hour of it. But Mike Licona is on here talking about the resurrection, makes some interesting comments. And I think, I have a lot more to say, but I'll say it while this is going on. So let me know if you can hear it. I think you should be able to.
Reasons to the best explanation. What has the most explanatory scope? And if your hypothesis...
Is it too loud? Live is twice as good. Hello, Jack of Trades. Yeah, let me know if that was too loud. I get the sense it's too loud. Am I too loud? Is the audio level?
Cannot account for all of the data. If it can only account for one or two of the facts, then it should not be preferred over a hypothesis that can explain all of the facts. Like the resurrection of Jesus can not only explain the empty tomb, but the appearances to the disciples, the appearance to Paul, and the appearance to his brother James. It was a skeptic prior to Jesus's death.
Okay, so I think this guy's name is Evan Minton from the Cerebral Faith Podcast, and he's talking about evidence to the best, or no, evidence to the best explanation, the hypothesis to the best explanation to the best hypothesis. The abductive approach. I want to make a comment about this. You notice that this works for fiction as well? So imagine a fictional novel, I don't know, The Matrix. Most people would say the screenplay for The Matrix. The best explanation for the facts within the screenplay is that there was a guy named Neo who was plugged out of the Matrix, came into the real life, and then defeated the people, the computers within the Matrix. Everything within, all the facts within the screenplay explain perfectly what happened. Hey, thank you for the donation, Casilia. Thanks for sharing your hobby with us. Well, you're very welcome. I got a little bit of time here this morning before I go golfing, and it might be raining too, so it'll be interesting to golf in the rain. So I thought I would go in and talk about this. But yeah, I love doing this stuff. I absolutely love it. And I'm not sure why I love it. Maybe I am a little sick because I am causing some pain and suffering for people. So am I sick? For those Christians who like Mike Licona, who think that they have history on their side, if I resonate with them just a scotch, and they say, yeah, Doug's right, I wouldn't believe that Julius Caesar flew over the Rubicon if I found a text that said so. So why am I believing Jesus rose from the dead again? If that resonates with them just a little teeny little bit, I tell you, I could be causing a lot of pain and suffering on people. Because now where are they going to get their hope? Where are they going to get their meaning? Where are they going to get their purpose? But getting back to this best explanation business, the abductive approach. Notice, I just want to make this comment. Notice that this works for fiction. And the whole issue is, what hypothesis explains all the facts? The question is, are they really facts or are they fiction? Someone is, Wellington, just hang on. I know who you are, but I want to get through this here.
That's correct.
So this article goes on to say, let's see, where did I leave off? Okay, well, according to the earliest evidence, since Paul uses vision, Galatians 1:12-16, Acts 26:19, as a resurrection appearance.
By the way, I'll just say right there, he doesn't say vision, he says revelation, right? And,
yeah.
And he says it's a revelation of, or by, or for, or from Jesus Christ. It could be any of those prepositions there could be used for.
Right. Then it necessarily follows that claims of visions, experiences that don't necessarily have anything to do with reality, were accepted as evidence of Jesus appearing. Paul makes no distinction in regards to the nature, quality, or type of appearances.
So what they're doing now is they're reading a Reddit post, I believe, from a atheist, and they're responding to it.
He uses the same verb, ophthe, for each one as if to equate them, and makes no reference to a separate and distinct dissension between the appearances.
Thanks for the donation. Why so religious? Caesar didn't fly over the Rubicon. He walked on its water. Prove me wrong, please. You know, I considered saying walking on water instead of flying, but since the Rubicon is such a small little stream, I mean, if I took ran as fast as I could, I think I could cross the Rubicon myself just by running really super fast.
This calls into question the veracity of the
But flying, that'd be tough.
Appearances, because it totally changes the meaning of appeared.
Well,
even though Jesus,
not only is that false, you know, not only is that false, but you know, as we discussed earlier, it doesn't say anything about equating the nature of those experiences. Remember the example I gave? Evan talked to Mike, Tim talked to Mike, Kurt talked to Mike. Yeah, y'all spoke to me, but it doesn't mean anything about the nature of those. It could have been an online interview, it could have been telephone, it could have been in person. It says nothing about the nature of it, and that's what we have here when the ophthe in 1 Corinthians 15.
Ophthe, I think, is the Greek for appeared. And Mike Licona is making an excellent point here, that it doesn't talk about the nature of the appearance. And this is precisely why I bring up the point about having a police sketch artist, having a criminal sketch artist on hand. Imagine 500 sketch artists at the time of this supposed appearance of Jesus to the 500, and sitting down separately, separating all 500 people. Are you listening, J. Warner Wallace? You're going to like this. Separating all the 500 people, sitting them down, and then having a sketch artist say, okay, describe Jesus now for me. Okay, height, weight, hair color, eye color, fat, thin, cheekbones. Was it one eyebrow or two? White teeth, brown teeth, yellow teeth. How many teeth? Some teeth missing. Any tattoos? Did Jesus have any tattoos? Oh, he did have a tattoo, big, like Mike Tyson. Okay. Can you imagine that? If we actually had sketch artists for the 500 and we had all 5 sketches and they all look basically the same, now we got something. 1 Corinthians 15, we got nothing. 500 sketches of the risen Jesus. We're on our way to something great.
Even though Jesus wasn't physically present on the earth, one could still claim that they just experienced his presence, and that counted as seeing Jesus. Based on the earliest evidence in Paul's letters, claiming Jesus appeared could be nothing more than feeling like you communicated with him from heaven in a vision or in a dream.
Hold on. So I'd say to that, I'd say that's true, but...
Oh, that's true. I mean, here we have a New Testament historian named Mike Licona admitting that this atheist, this yucky atheist, saying that the appearance could have been just this feeling of like those Pentecostal people. Christians, you know what I'm talking about, right? Those Pentecostals. Yuck. I mean, they believe anything. On Sunday mornings at around 11:15, maybe 11:20, when the music reaches its climax, they experience Jesus. Jesus appears to them in church. Man, those flag-waving phony Pentecostals, they didn't see Jesus. They just think they did, right? Mike Licona is admitting that this is true, that we do not know the nature of these appearances, and it could be that. Dale Allison says the exact same thing, I think. Truth hurts.
Paul's writings that we just went over informs us that this is not what is meant by it.
Yeah. It's only later, after the Gospels are written, that we see the appearances grow more physical/corporeal, but scholars have long recognized that the Gospels don't actually go back to eyewitnesses, and the data they contain evolves more fantastic, as if a legend is growing. Since Paul is the only verified first-hand source by someone who claims...
Bible Burner says, former Pentecostal here. You can testify. Bible Burner can testify that what I'm saying is true. Can I get an amen, Bible Burner? You say it. You tell them. You tell these people that you saw Jesus. Jesus appeared to you, or your friends, or your girlfriends. Hopefully, you only had one at a time. Or your mom, or your dad. And that when the Spirit was in your belly, and when the Holy Spirit was a-flowing, you experienced Jesus. He appeared to you that day in church. Hallelujah, amen.
Claim to see Jesus in the first person, and the appearance to him was a vision, not a physical encounter with a revived corpse, which he does not distinguish from the appearances to the others in 1 Corinthians 15, then the earliest evidence suggests these were originally subjective spiritual experiences. Thus, the resurrection argument fails to meet the burden of proof. They really saw Jesus alive again after his death.
Okay, well, here I'd say, we've already dealt with a lot of this, but I do want to deal with the question where he says scholars have long, not the question, but the statement, scholars have long recognized that the Gospels don't actually go back to eyewitnesses. This is false. I have a student, he's no longer my student. His name is Joshua Pelletier.
Joshua Pelletier. Is he French Canadian? I tell you, if he's French Canadian, I take it with a grain of salt. No, I'm kidding. I love French Canadians. I did a video on this a while back.
And I supervised his master's thesis at Houston Baptist University. Did a great one, really is. He's going to expand it for his PhD dissertation. And he consulted more than 200 critical scholars writing in English since 1965. So we're talking.
Why 1965, I wonder? I never got an answer to that question. And why only English? Could it be that most of them were American, raised, loving the Lord, a lot of them from the Bible Belt, saying, I love Jesus before I even opened up the Bible. He testified to my life. I saw trash can lids fly in the air. Don't you tell me there's no God. By the way, then I became a historian. And yep, damn dare were eyewitnesses. Oh, Mike Licona's going to hate me.
55 years here, okay? 55 years of critical scholarship writing on prolegomena related to the Gospel of Mark. And he dealt with 3 different areas. Who wrote Mark? Was Peter, what was the primary source behind Mark? Was it Peter? And when was Mark written? And what he found, the majority of critical scholars dealing on these issues since 1965, he found that the majority of critical scholars dealing with it say that Mark was written between the years 65 and 70, and only a very few of them placed Mark after 70.
The majority of scholars think that the Gospel of Mark, the first gospel written, according to many, 65 to 70. If anybody who walked and talked with Jesus was about the same age as Jesus, which is a very reasonable thing to guess, we don't know, unfortunately, that would place the author of the Gospel of Mark to be around 65 to 70 years old. You know, back then they had worse stuff than COVID. Did you know that? I mean, just eating the wrong food could kill you. Diarrhea could kill you. Getting the flu could kill you so easily. You think COVID here is bad nowadays. I mean, back then, I wonder if we could see a distribution curve of illnesses with people over 65 back then. I mean, the people who lived longer than 65 back then, they were those city slicker types who never saw a day of work in their life, who stayed in their cozy little castles and ate the best food. And ooh, those scumbags, those peasants out there, no, they don't talk to them. They lived, maybe to 65, 70, 80. But, the people who, everyday people, living that long, back 2,000 years ago, no penicillin. A lot of them didn't even bother to wash their hands. Like when they went to the urinals, they didn't wash their hands after because they didn't have running water. I mean, at least not the type that with taps and stuff. I don't even know what they used to wipe their bums with back then. Big leaves? I don't know.
So then he found that the majority of critical scholars writing since 1965.
I hope nobody's having lunch right now.
Think they agree with the traditional authorship of Mark. And they also agreed that Mark's primary source was none other than the Apostle Peter. So that's that. And then you come to Luke.
Yeah, that's that. Oh, because we got 75% of people studying English from 1965 saying that Mark wrote it. We don't know where he's from, what year, where he wrote it. Got it from Peter. Well, that's that.
And John, you got Craig Keener, who has written in his just amazing commentary on Acts, that 4-volume set. In volume 1, the first 624 pages are devoted to prolegomena, to Luke and Acts, right? And in there, he says the majority of scholars, critical scholars today, they don't name Luke as the author, but the majority of them do agree that the author of Luke's Gospel and Acts was a traveling companion of Paul.
Okay, so they don't name Luke. That's interesting. So Michael Cohen's admitting that we don't know the name of the author of the Gospel of Luke, but it is a traveling companion.
Who had access to Paul, who had access to...
The author of the Gospel of Luke and Acts had access to Paul? Well, wait a minute. You mean like he had Paul's letters in front of him, or did he know Paul personally? J. Warner Wallace, someone paged J. Warner Wallace. You got to separate these witnesses. I mean, if you want to know the truth, you got to take Paul and you hide him in a corner, and then you interrogate him, ask him what he saw, what he learned, whatever. Then you take the gospel author of Luke and you put him in a separate. You don't let them talk. You're saying that he had access to Paul. They're in the same room together. My goodness, these are not independent accounts. This is a guy, an author of Luke, saying, "Hey, Paul, well, what did you say again? Yeah, I like that. Well, no, that I don't like. Oh, that I like." And then he wrote his gospel.
The Gospel of Mark, and who had access to other eyewitnesses. So, and then you come to John's Gospel. And in Keener's commentary on John, he deals with the same kind of issue related to John's Gospel, where modern critical scholars are. And although the majority of critical scholarship today reject the traditional authorship of the gospel.
What? Uh-oh. You hear that, Christians? You gotta, if you admire the historical method and you admire critical scholarship, if you admire Mike Licona, if you admire Craig Keener, I think you have to lower your confidence that John, the disciple John, wrote the Gospel of John. Because Mike Licona just said that the critical scholarship, the majority of them don't buy that anymore. Or maybe never, I don't know.
Gospel of John as being written by John, the son of Zebedee. They do think that the author used one of Jesus' disciples, someone who had traveled with Jesus, who was an eyewitness, as their primary source. So to say that scholars have long recognized that the Gospels don't actually go back to eyewitnesses is just simply false. It's a claim that some skeptics make today, even some skeptical scholars, but it's false.
Yeah, well, the thing is, let's say people who walked and talked with Jesus did write the Gospels. Let's take it back to the title of this live stream. Julius Caesar flew over the Rubicon. Let's say the records that were found yesterday, that they dug up, let's say scholars believe that it was written by people who walked and talked with Julius Caesar. Now, let me ask you a question, Christians. Do you believe those records that say that Julius Caesar flew over the Rubicon? Unaided, he just levitated and flew across. And all his soldier friends were just like amazed and said, surely he is the Son of God or some type of deity. You wouldn't believe it. So all this is kind of irrelevant to a guy like me, but it's interesting. When I interviewed Mike Licona, I should have queued that up, but I asked him about the traditional authorship, and I said, "Is it true that the reason why we say who wrote the Gospels is because, who's the first guy? Yeah, never mind.
It's very wrong.
Maybe I'll link it later."
Do you think that maybe this author, this writer is
breaking up?
Nope, you're freezing.
Conflict with the claim it wasn't based on eyewitness?
You froze there, so you froze. So go back.
Okay. So I was saying, do you think that maybe this is this author is conflating the assertion that the Gospels are not, most scholars reject the traditional authorship, and in that translates in his mind to they're not based on eyewitnesses?
It could be. I mean, whoever wrote this, they're just not so familiar. All they're doing is they're appealing to other skeptical scholarship. I mean, notice this guy doesn't even show familiarity with my book, which is right now.
Oh, this is the William Lane Craig technique. Yeah, he hasn't even read my book, so we don't really need to listen to him.
Many scholars consider it to be the book on the resurrection of Jesus, and I deal with it extensively. And if you don't like my book, there's still Tom Wright's book that came out in 2003. That's considered one of the finest books on the resurrection right now that deals with these issues. And he doesn't show any familiarity with this. He just shows familiarity with some skeptical scholarship and stuff that's, frankly speaking, is quite dated. So, yeah.
Yeah.
The Reddit author is here in the chat. Can he confirm what he meant? Hey, yes, Reddit author, if you want. Let's see. Wellington, go away. And then let me go like that. You can hop in, and we can talk.
I'll put a link in the show notes to those two books. Your book, the Resurrection of Jesus: A New Historiographical Approach, and Tom Wright's book, The Resurrection of the Son of God. I'll link to those.
There's a short video that I made, I think just last week. What happens when we die? And it's on my YouTube channel, and you could link to that as well.
Okay. And of course, I'll link to my own YouTube series on the resurrection, because I want people to go watch that. I put a lot of time and effort into that last year. So we'll go. I'll put those in the show notes, and people can go check it out. I highly recommend that you check out Mike's book. It is, I agree, one of the best works on the historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. And yeah, just read his book and read N.T. Wright's book back to back, and you'll get some of the best scholarly defenses on the historical case, defenses of the historicity of the central event of Christianity.
Yeah, the problem is people who you know, love, and trust, if they were to say that they saw someone levitate or someone come back from the dead, you still wouldn't believe them. And yet you believe strangers. I know John Piper says that he knows the Apostle Paul better than does he say even his own wife? I think John Piper's on record saying something like that. But Christians, you don't know these gospel authors. You don't. You don't know Paul. You don't. You only know what it says in these texts about them. And yet you trust them. And if your default position is you trust them until you need a reason not to, well, do you trust the author of the records they dug up yesterday that said Julius Caesar flew over the Rubicon? What reason do you have to distrust that author? Maybe because he said that Julius Caesar flew. Maybe that's a good reason to distrust him.
So going on to, we're almost done with this writing here. There's one more section, and
by the way, Evan, there's one more book you might want to list, and it just came out, I think, in March, and it's by Dale Allison. I read the draft of it, and it has since been renamed, so I don't know the name of it, but a person can look at that on Amazon.
I'm going to help Mike Licona here. If you're a Christian, don't read Dale Allison's book. It's just going to cause you to doubt. At least some of you. It's going to cause some of you to doubt. So don't do it. It's not worth it. It's not worth losing your hope, meaning, and purpose.
Amazon or ChristianBook.com or Barnes & Noble, Dale Allison. And he wrote a large book on the resurrection. And even though he teaches at Princeton and he's not an evangelical, even though if he's not an evangelical, don't read him. I mean, I'm not an evangelical either, so you should probably just click off. He falls short of where I think the evidence leads. He comes up short of where I think he should have. He still says that the disciples, the text itself suggests that the disciples believed that Jesus had been raised bodily, physically from the dead.
And the Roman soldiers believed that Julius Caesar flew over the Rubicon. And Pompey even had them killed. Now, some people say that they were killed just because they associated with Julius Caesar, and it had nothing to do with him levitating and flying over the Rubicon. But that was according to the text that was unearthed yesterday, that's the core doctrine. So of course they died as martyrs for their belief that Julius Caesar could fly.
It's hard to dispute.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to read Allison's book yet because it came out recently and it's sort of expensive. I plan on getting the cheaper Kindle edition, but it's on my Amazon wish list. And
Alan Bird says Dale Allison's book is worth reading. Allison says the record's not to be trusted. Uh-oh.
And I will get to it. My friend Caleb Jackson, he's recently became the co-host of the podcast Proselytize and Apostatize, Proselytize or Apostatize. He really recommends it, and I first heard about it from him, and so that's why I put it in my Amazon wish list. So going on to the final part of the article, he says, common apologetic objection. But Paul believed in a physical resurrection. Doesn't that mean the appearances would have been physical as well? Response, non sequitur. This is simply conflating Paul's belief in the resurrection with the resurrection appearances, when those aren't the same.
Oh, we have the author of the Reddit thing that they're discussing. Hello?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. What's your name?
Well, I'm going by the pseudonym. It's All Is Vanity on Reddit.
All is Vanity. So did you write what they're talking about?
Yes, I did.
You did.
And I was very surprised to see that he took the time to respond, because that actually gives that means it makes my arguments a little more.
Okay, I think we might be back, but let me get confirmation. And let me go here. Yes, we are back. Okay, so someone that you know maybe sent your Reddit post to the host of this podcast, and then they decided to spend an hour on it. What do you think they got right about your post? What did you think that they strawmanned with you?
Yeah, I joined the live stream late, so I'm not. Did you start from the beginning of their podcast?
No, I started at minute 50 roughly.
Okay, that's fine. If you go back and listen to it, notice how, well, I guess it would help to read the Reddit post first, although they do go through it. But notice how all my claim is making is that the evidence of, like, Jesus appeared in 1 Corinthians 15 is not sufficient to claim that anybody actually saw him. That's all my claim is. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But Licona, when he responds, he doesn't argue against that claim. He's arguing against the idea that I'm saying every time that verb is used, it necessarily means a spiritual appearance. That's not the claim that I'm making. I'm just trying to show an at least equal probability that that's what Paul is saying, and Licona admits that, because he admits that what I'm saying is vague, which means, hey, it could be that, right? I mean, is that a charitable interpretation?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I think I played that part where he said where he says technically correct or true.
Yeah. So, but he spends time on finding all these other examples where the verb ophthe, that's in the Greek there, the word that he uses for appeared, it means a physical appearance. And I was never claiming that the word doesn't ever mean a physical appearance. So he's not addressing the claim that I make, but he's intended on, well, I mean, I'm very familiar with apologetic tactics, and as you are too. And they like to straw man things a lot. And I'm really happy that he did respond to this, though, because it gives a chance to further the dialogue along a little bit. But it's a little frustrating too, trying to respond to these things, because they're arguing against things you're not actually saying.
Yeah, I often use the Pentecostal analogy. Have you ever been in a Pentecostal church?
I know some Pentecostals, so I'm very familiar. I'm actually I'm kind of in the closet, so to speak, because I live in the Bible Belt area. I'm actually communicating with you in a church parking lot, because I was running errands, so I'm on my phone.
Oh wow, your car might blow up. And so to me, I think it's extremely reasonable to say that if people had these appearances, that it would be of the type of the Pentecostalism.
Yep, that's I use that example too when I when people say, well, 500 people can't hallucinate Jesus, when they're trying to say that 500 people can't be wrong, right? But the problem is, like, there are mass ecstatic group appearances that happen all the time every Sunday in church, and they think they see or experience Jesus. And so the problem with that in 1 Corinthians 15 is that verb ophthe can imply the experience the presence of Jesus. So Licona he's essentially, he accuses me of begging the question, but I can charge the same thing back at him, because he's assuming these people really saw Jesus, and that's what this text means. But I think what my argument did was show that if he admits my interpretation is vague, he also has to admit his interpretation is vague.
Mm-hmm.
But if he admits his interpretation is vague, he can't at the same time use it as evidence that people really saw Jesus, because it's vague. It could go either way. And since he's the one making the affirmative claim here, he's the one saying the evidence for the resurrection should be convincing, then it doesn't work, because it ends up being vague.
Yeah, but then you got the Gospels that make it very clear it's a bodily, physical resurrection. So everything you're saying is moot. However, what I find interesting is that when Licona debates the resurrection of Jesus, he almost always ignores the Gospels and just uses Paul.
Yeah, I was going to, that's so. I'm looking. I seem to remember a relatively recent debate or a lecture that he gave. It's on YouTube from about a year ago or less, where he basically says, more or less, I don't need the Gospels to demonstrate the resurrection. I just need Paul's letters. And I'm going to hold him to that standard, because when this all flushes out in the end, he's going to have to appeal to the Gospels for the physical appearances, because those are not in Paul. So he's necessarily reading the Orthodox chronology from Luke Acts. He's reading in the later developed ascension from Luke Acts into Paul, but Paul never mentions a separate and distinct ascension. Never.
That's a great true or false question. Like, true or false, Paul talks about Jesus walking and talking with people after his resurrection and before his ascension.
Yes, exactly. That's why there's a lot. I mean, I probably don't have time to go over all this, but I am going to do a written response to his points. But that he seems, this is another thing that drives me crazy. So in his effort to show that people really saw Jesus, he argues for the physicality of the resurrection. Have you noticed that? He goes, my claim is I'm challenging the nature of the appearances, because how did these people conclude Jesus was resurrected, right? They had to see Jesus, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the evidence they used to conclude Jesus was resurrected was that they thought they saw him alive again. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the nature of the appearances here, which is very important.
Right.
If he just appeals to the he tries to use all these proof texts that show Paul believed in a physical resurrection, but saying Paul believed in Jesus was physically resurrected is not the same thing as saying Paul really saw the resurrected Jesus. Those
Correct.
are two distinct claims. So he's banking on his exegesis of Paul's letters that show Paul believed in a physical resurrection, but he's assuming the later Orthodox narrative where the physically resurrected Jesus walks and talks on earth, is touched and eats fish. But those claims are not in Paul's letters.
Right. And it's very tough for Christians to forget that they know the Gospels and just read Paul for Paul. Like, a great question I sometimes ask, I think it's great, is if all you had was Paul's letters, would you believe in the resurrection of Jesus?
Yeah. Right. That's what I'm holding him to that standard, because he says he does in his recent work over the last 2 years or so. He definitely puts an emphasis on Paul's letters, and rightly so, because Paul is our earliest source. So it makes sense to go with that first. And secondly, he is our only verified firsthand source, because Paul says Jesus appeared to me in the first person.
Yeah.
But the Gospels do not say the Gospels are not written in first person. I know that, I'm familiar with all the arguments.
Yeah, that's not how they did it back then. Come on.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot to unpack here. We could spend hours on this. Maybe we could do something later about it. But I guess I did want to address one other thing, though, if I may. If you listen to that full podcast, Mike Licona, he offers an analogy. Like, so my argument was. My argument is basically, since Paul uses the same verb for each appearance in the list, then it seems at least equally likely that he was saying that they were the same or similar in nature, because he does not make a distinction. He does not say anybody saw Jesus before he went to heaven. He doesn't say any of these appearances happened between the resurrection and ascension. So my take on it is, if you just read the text, it looks like that you can read that and think, okay, Paul was saying they were the same or similar type. But when Licona, when he responds to this, he uses this analogy of people. Let's say that I went and talked to somebody, and then we have people can communicate. We have evidence that people can communicate in different ways. It doesn't mean that they communicated just by phone or just by text or just by, talking face to face. There are different ways people can communicate, right? And so I actually agree with that. I totally agree with that. But the problem is, if he disagrees with the interpretation that they were the same or similar, then he's necessarily claiming that they are different, because there's no other option. If you disagree that they're the same, you are committed to the opinion that they are different. Where's he getting the idea that they're different from? It's not from Paul. He's reading the Gospels into Paul's letters.
Yeah.
So we have background knowledge and evidence. I'm trying to project Camille Gregor in here. He uses the Bayes reasoning, right?
Yeah.
We have a lot of background knowledge and evidence of people communicating in different ways. But if you just read Paul's letters and don't read the Gospels into them, we do not have a lot of background evidence and knowledge that the risen Jesus was seen physically. So Licona is bringing that presupposition into the text.
Well, and sometimes it can work against him if he brings in the Gospels into Paul, because Gospels talk about this physical body of Jesus as being weird, being different. Like, did Jesus's physical body, was it composed of protons, neutrons, and electrons? Was it made out of amino acids and carbohydrates and fats and water? And if so, why is it could go through cellulose and walls, as described in the Gospel of John?
Yeah. There are some definite, and it's interesting. Notice how Luke and John, they're, according to most scholars, they are the latest Gospels written. And you only get these amazing sudden disappearance, reappearance, and the walking through walls stories in the latest Gospels written.
Yeah.
You don't get that from Paul, Mark, or Matthew.
No, the Christian will just say, well, these are just miracles. But I think, doesn't the New Testament say that the resurrected body of Jesus is going to be like, we're going to have bodies like that? Because Jesus was the first fruits. He was the first resurrected body. Like Lazarus was just a revivified body. He was dead and he was just revived. But a resurrected body is one that's different than our physical body.
Yeah, that's true. Licona likes to he appeals to this as an argument for the physical resurrection. But I disagree with his exegesis because, well, I'll try to sum it up really quickly. If you pay attention to the text that Paul cites, Licona cites, he likes to use, I believe it's Romans 8:11, where it says, "Give life to our mortal bodies." And Licona assumes that is a reference to resurrection. But I disagree, because if you look up the Greek word for mortal, I can't pronounce it, I'm sorry, but if you just look it up in a lexicon, the word for mortal means somebody who's living. It's not a reference to somebody who's dead. So that it's impossible, it's referring to resurrection there, because obviously a requirement to be resurrected is you have to be dead first. So I disagree with his exegesis on that passage. I think it's referring to a figurative sense, give life to our mortal bodies so that we reject sin and we reject sinful life. So we live, more spiritual, enlightened, so to speak.
Being filled with the Holy Spirit, that Pentecostal thing.
Yeah, if you read Romans 8, just pay attention to it. It's not talking about resurrection. The passage it mentions the Spirit by which raised Jesus from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies, but that's not a reference to resurrection. He's just mentioning the Spirit there.
Yeah. Do you talk to a lot of people about this topic, or do you just write about it?
I have I like to debate these things a lot, so I try to get my arguments out there on different various Reddit forums and YouTube comments.
Can I make a guess that, and I don't mean this to offend you, because I'm going to offend myself, but have you noticed that when we discuss these issues with Christians, it doesn't make a dent?
Yeah, I do notice that, and I think to myself, what is the point? But I don't know. I guess I sort of enjoy it, but what I want to do eventually is I want to provide a resource where it has all these apologetics arguments in there.
You enjoy causing pain to Christians? Is that what I heard you say?
No, I just look at it purely as an intellectual exercise. I don't, if somebody has a good argument and it refutes mine, I will be honest and admit it. I mean, I'm totally, like, I have no, my pride might be hurt, but if my argument is refuted, I will totally admit it, man. I'll be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. In my experience, and this is why, maybe a couple years ago on my channel, I would go more into the evidence, the historical evidence. But over the years, I've just learned it really doesn't make a dent with some of these Christians, because you are, and I'm getting to the science of what causes people to believe what they believe and not. Unless you can really cause cognitive dissonance where they have almost no choice but to reject the belief, they're going to find a way around it. They're going to say, yeah, I hear what you're saying, Doug. I hear what you're saying. Oh, what's your name again?
All is vanity.
All is vanity.
Resurrection expert on YouTube.
Yeah, all is vanity. I hear what you guys are saying, but Mike Licona has some good points, and I can interpret the Bible like he does, and the martyrdom accounts and all this prophecy. You put it all together, and I still think I have a good case. Any answer that they can grasp onto, they'll take, and they're done.
Yeah, I guess it's like, I guess it has to do with what you regard as good evidence, because apologists are claiming, at least I like to separate, the normal Christian from a Christian apologist. There's a big difference there, because most Christians that I know of, they don't know anything about apologetics. They don't care.
Right.
They just go to church on Sunday and believe, right? But
that's why I support apologetics. I got to get it out there.
The apologists, though, they're saying that this evidence should convince you. They think that it should convince people, and I just disagree with that. I mean, I don't see how. I don't think in the end, when it all comes out, it's not really based on evidence. It's just based on a deep-seated need to believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think Carl Sagan may have said that or something, but.
Well, that's why I use these analogies all the time to show that, look, you really wouldn't believe that Julius Caesar flew over the Rubicon if a text said that he flew in front of 512 of his generals, and finally the person who wrote the record. You wouldn't believe it, not for a second. And they know that's true, and yet they believe Paul.
Yep, that's right.
Why? That's the question.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I mean, a lot of it, I don't want to. I know that when you bring this up to William Lane Craig, he calls it, well, that's just a genetic fallacy, but it has to do, a lot of it has to do with how you're raised. I mean, right? That's why people in the Middle East are Muslim. I mean, you can't really.
No, they're Muslim because of the facts and evidence. and logic and reason. I've been told that.
Yeah. That's the Muslim apologist, right? If you, I don't think the person that you meet on the street, just the normal person you meet on the street would say that, but I don't know. It's interesting.
The thing is, what's amazing to me is if humans believe things based on facts and evidence, and I can enter the Christian paradigm, why aren't everybody Christians? If people used facts and evidence to believe what they believe, then why, and now I'm talking to the Muslims, why aren't there more Muslims? I mean, sure, there's some people that have free will and they'll reject it, but if most people use facts and reason and evidence and logic, the point is we humans suck at it. We don't use facts, evidence, and reason. And it's because of these biases and how we were raised, and we just can't see. And that's why we have computers and robots and measuring tapes. And
yeah, I know that you've said that you don't like you eye roll at philosophy, but
no, I roll at philosophers.
Okay,
yeah.
Well, you are like you're making philosophical arguments because I've read philosophy of religion and they bring this type of stuff up that you're saying, but the way that you communicate it, I think, is much more effective because it instantly generates the cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Instead of using a bunch of like loaded language and bloviation, it gets to the point, and that's what I enjoy about your approach.
Yeah. The philosophers, they suck, most of them, at communicating.
Yeah. For sure. I think I gotta go, but I appreciate you having me on. I'm sorry if I was a little scatterbrained. I'm kind of nervous because I've never spoken live about this.
No, you did very, very well. In fact, you did so well. I'm going to invite you to my Wednesday night poker night.
Oh, sweet. You play online poker or something?
Yeah. So a very select few subscribers who support the channel, who support me, get to come on Wednesday nights. And so you're invited. And anybody I interview is welcome. Do you play poker?
I haven't in a while, but I did. When I did, I enjoyed it. But I'd actually love to get back into it. I think that'd be fun. Yeah,
it's just a sort of like a home game, family home game. We do play for money, but there's no rake or anything. It's just small stakes, and it's fun. Email me. Do you know my email?
Is it in your YouTube videos? Oh yeah, I've seen it before.
Yeah, but I got two of them. One is like the tip jar, but the main one is on my about tab. It's the DLL1671 at Yahoo.
Okay.
Yeah, email me. I'll put you on the list, and then we can talk about this stuff offline as well.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on, Doug. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for writing that Reddit thing.
Look for I'm gonna do a future response, and I'll let you know when I have it done.
Oh, go into the live stream chat and put whatever you want, any links you want, and I'll try to make sure it doesn't get blocked.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that.
And if that doesn't work, then put it in the comments afterwards.
Okay.
Okay. Take care.
All right. You too. Bye.
Bye. Well, there we have it. I don't think there's anything left to be said. Jesus Christ did not rise from the dead bodily. To every Christian listening, all your hope, meaning, and purpose is now gone. You should go to your room and cry for 2 hours. After you're done crying, come out of your room, hold your head up high, and say that now you're going to live your life with the truth. Oh, that was so bad. Who do we have? Is this Wellington? Oh, this is Mohammed. Mohammed? I talked to you yesterday. Okay, we'll just see what you want to say. Hi, Mohammed.
Yeah, hello. Me from last time?
Yes, I think so. But you need to turn off something because I'm hearing feedback.
All right. Yeah, I would like to apologize about last time. I was talking very quickly. I was stressed out. It was my first time speaking live on YouTube, so.
Well, I understand. You're the 18-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And you're an ex-Muslim, right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. I just got to make sure I keep my Muhammad straight. There's so many of them. Peace be upon you. But yeah, no, don't worry about it. No problems.
Yeah. So I don't think I introduced myself quite well last time. Just
Oh.
went straight into the topic.
Okay, so yeah, you can introduce yourself.
Yeah. So I started doubting Islam when I around 1 year ago. But I still kept on it. Partly because the problem of evil that we're just talking about. I was just wondering, if I don't believe in God, if I don't believe in afterlife, then there is no justice in this world. And, you only live once, and then we're just gonna die. And life, just gonna suck. But then after I watched your, when you were in Hamza's den,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember watching that and seeing their response to the problem of evil. And that just pulled my last string that I had. And then I just left the religion.
Wait a minute. You left. I'm gonna mute you because I'm getting feedback. But you saw me on Hamza's den. You were doubting, and then after you saw me talk to those guys, you left Islam. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Around that.
Oh, they're gonna hate me now.
Yeah, I mean, I was already kind of on the edge at that time, so it wasn't. But it felt really weird when I left the religion, though. I felt very terrible that I left it, but I got over it pretty quickly after that.
Do you have any advice for me as far as how to deal with these Muslim young men? I mean, like, they get so defensive, and it's like they feel like Hamza's Den and these other shows, they're just, it's all about destroying the opposition and just humiliating them. And like, what's wrong with them?
Well, you see, this is the thing about me. Yeah, if I want to be personal, is that I've always been open-minded. So even when I was listening to these Muslim apologists like Mohammed Hijab and Hamza Zotsis, I was still quite open-minded. I believed in most of what they said, but there were also parts I disagreed with them. So that kept me away from basically, having blind faith in whatever they say. But I think it also has to do with, I was also always a curious person, so I would always, argue to a short extent, not with my parents. So I would ask them some questions about Islam, and so I was always quite open-minded. But I know that I have plenty of Muslim friends who are very, very dogmatic. Like, they believe, like, it's just ridiculous. Even when I was religious, I was still shocked by how dogmatic they were.
I got a question for you.
Yep.
And turn me down if you can. What was I going to ask you? Do you have a relative or a close friend that you admire that's older than you, an uncle, an aunt, cousin, whatever, that's sort of like a free thinker, open-minded, and maybe that's why you're more likely to be that way?
Not really, because it's mostly to do with my father, actually.
Okay.
My father is a very religious person, and in my opinion, he's also quite dogmatic. But he loves reading, he loves learning, and I remember when I was a little kid, he would send me to this library. I had a little library inside our house, and make me read a lot of stuff. So he got me interested in learning new things and being open-minded. But because I grew up in a secular country, I didn't get a lot of that dogma that he got from his home country.
Yeah, I've often said that one way to get people out of their deeply held beliefs is to move them into a completely different culture, a different way of life, have friends that disagree with you. Is there any advice that you would just give me in general with dealing with Muslims? Like, how can I help them to be a little bit more like you?
I'm gonna be honest, I actually don't know. So I can't give you a straight answer. But in my opinion, I think it just takes time. That's all I have to say. I think it just takes time. And some people are more open-minded than others. So if you just spend enough time with them, I think they will eventually leave.
Okay. Yeah, and maybe instead of, and my main concern is helping them not be so combative. Like I really do think a lot of Muslims view me as an enemy, and that I'm just purposely trying to hurt them and destroy them. And so that's why I think they use that language back on me, that that I've been destroyed, I've been humiliated, just a boy who doesn't care about reason and logic and so forth. I think they're projecting the things about themselves. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to help build that bridge without making it worse. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Before I watched you, I also thought you were how should I say, a sort of like a fox who's being sneaky and wants to purposely send people to hellfire. That was literally how I was thinking about you. But I was quite open-minded. So after having watched the interview, I saw, I didn't really think you were, after having watched your video where you were in Hamza Den, I didn't really think you were being that sneaky about it, actually.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I'll admit that I'll use language that is provocative at times. Like I'll say the word stupid, or and I will go into the psychological reasons why people believe, but this is based on science. And I could choose my words differently. Like when I talked to Nathan from Digital Gnosis after I was on Hamza's Den, and one of my subscribers pointed this out too, and I think it was Alan Bird, and you're here, right, Alan? And instead of saying that I purposely criticized the Christian that came before me in order to build rapport, I could have just said, yeah, that Christian did a bad job. I sincerely think that Christian did a bad job. I would have answered differently as a Christian. However, I'm here today to put my best foot forward, and I don't want to cause any animosity. I could have just changed the language slightly and everything would have been fine. But the thing is, I kind of like challenging people to not get their emotions ruffled, not get their feathers ruffled. And it's so easy to ruffle people's feathers that it's kind of enjoyable to me.
Yeah, I think I remember when I was Muslim as well, in Islam you're taught that there are two kind of devils. There are the demons, and then there are humans that are also devils. And the humans that are devils are the ones who are trying to take you away from Islam. So if there is someone who's trying to take you to Islam, then instinctively in Islam it's supposed to believe that person is actually a devil and is trying to lead you to hellfire. So, and I think that belief is one of the main reasons why people are very dogmatic and they get very emotional when they start arguing with people like you, who use a lot of strategies to try to convince them out of Islam.
Yeah, and one of my strategies is, though, to even admit that I might be a devil. But I also would point out that if it's true that Islam's false, then what I'm doing is noble, yes? And I'll pose that question to Christians as well. And they have to admit, yeah, if I'm leading people away from Christianity and Christianity is false, then what I'm doing is a good thing. If I'm leading people away from Islam and Islam is false, then what I'm doing is a good thing. Now, of course, they can say the opposite and say, but it's a bad thing if you're not. But I truly believe that Islam's false. I truly believe that Christianity is false. So in my heart, I'm not doing a bad thing. I'm doing a noble thing. I'm doing, if there is a God out there, he's looking down on PineCreek and saying, well done, good and faithful servant, because you're leading these people away from these man-made religions. So anyhow, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, so I think it was that a problem of evil, that was the way that they answered the question to me was very interesting. I was still shocked by how they did not, when he asked, what was it, the proof or drown? I was quite shocked how they dodged the question and they did not try to answer it. And that really showed me how dogmatic they were, because even whilst I was a Muslim, I was still against being dogmatic. So when I saw that they were being very dogmatic and how they would actually allow for someone to be drowned, instead of being proof, that really shifted my view of them.
Yeah, I agree. That was a pivotal moment when they refused to answer that question, because if they answer it and go against their God, that causes big problems for them. But anyhow, thank you for coming on, Mohammed. I'm going to let you go. Yeah. And Christians themselves will hesitate, just like Muslims, in answering that question. And to me, it's about fear. It's the fear of God hearing his child say, Daddy, I wouldn't have done it that way, Daddy. Seriously? Drowning children when you could have just poofed them? Dad, that's bad. Like, then what was the father going to say to his child who says, Dad, you did it wrong? Where were you when I created the heavens and the earth, right? The fact that a Christian and a Muslim can't even say to their master, I would have done it differently, or I'm not okay with what you did here, just shows the fear and the slave mentality. Now, Muslims are proud to be slaves, and I think Christians less so, but they still admit they're slaves as well. Christians and Muslims, you no longer have to be a slave. At least not to these deities. If you're going to be a slave to a deity that will say, you know what? I welcome you to say you would have did it differently. And you know what? You don't have to fear me. I mean, I'm not going to throw you in hell. Relax. Take care. I mean, you're fine. If you're going to be a slave to a deity, be a slave to that type of deity who is totally okay with you questioning what the God has done. And it doesn't threaten you with hellfire if you disagree or if you are disobedient. And I think, what is it? 95% of Muslims at least believe in this eternal torment idea. And I would say at least 60% of Christians, at least in the US. Poof or drown has given me a legit fear of death by drowning. Yeah, I do not want to die by drowning. Now, some people say that it's probably pretty peaceful, but if you know how to swim, no. Like, imagine being plopped down in the ocean, in the middle of the ocean, and know you're going to die, and just a matter of, dying by fire is also pretty bad. Why are we talking about this? I'd rather die from COVID. Oh, now everybody hates me. Glory to Shiva. That's another thing. I don't think I could worship a male deity like that is a father. Now a woman deity. Now we're talking. I could worship a woman. Is Shiva's the woman, right? Yeah, waterboarding is torture for a reason. Was it Hitchens who got waterboarded and he could only stand 3 seconds? Okay, so my computer crashed only once at 1080, but I think, well, it wasn't the computer, it was the XSplit. So maybe I should go back to 720 just to be safe. I don't know. Can you guys notice the difference between 1080 and 720? Is it really worth it? Cancel PineCreek. Yeah. Shiva is in the Temple of Doom. Oh, the movie? Shiva's male? Just think what could be done with those extra hands. Oh, yeah. You like 1080 better, Sebastian? Would you worship an animal-human hybrid like an Egyptian god? No, I'm not into animals. I'm into Homo sapiens. Well, we are animals, but I'm into a certain type of animal. I'm into female Homo sapien animals. One in particular. My wife. And when it comes to female Homo sapiens, I like them like I like my coffee. Hot, black, and strong. Weren't you going to change your background back? I don't have that background on my new computer yet, Kessie. But I will. It's interesting how we humans are resistant to change. Like if I was to change my music or my background, it's like, it's not the same, right? 1080 for gaming, yes, but not for podcasting. Would you have a poker night with only apologists? Mozzarella Martin. Now that's a good idea. I think I might start a new poker night for just apologists. You know what's going to happen though? I'm going to show up and I'm going to be playing solitaire instead. PineCreek is showing his ignorance. Animals and humans are separated by spirit. No. My dog has a soul. He shows empathy. He has temper tantrums, or she does. Has temper tantrums and shows empathy and love. My dog worries about heaven and hell. My dog reads the Quran and the Gospels. My dog has a soul. There's no separation between me and my dog. Pork night. It's the poker. Yeah, pork night for ex-Muslims. Or for Jews. Porker night. No, that sounds bad. Scratch that from the record. Hey, Myron, take that out and post. When is Satan getting back? Next week, Satan will be back from Orlando? Maybe. Yeah, he loves Orlando so much because of the heat. I started whistling your music the other day and my Christian wife was like, "What are you whistling?" Invite your Christian wife to watch, Nicholas. Christian women love me. PineCreek, are you taking calls? I did take a couple, but I'm going to go golfing soon. Gotta have priorities. Satan is coming back with COVID then. No. Satan's all for vaccinations. He's been vaccinated. Anybody who works for Satan, me included, has to be vaccinated. That's a company policy. Yes, Deepak, it's a short stream. Only an hour 20. Isn't that short? My apologies to Michael Licona. He was scheduled to come on and talk about how Jesus was truly resurrected bodily. But we just ran out of time. Have a good rest of your day, guys.